Our story today is Mark chapter 12, verses 41 to 44, the widow's mite. She took the last step of the staircase ascending the Temple Mount and paused to gaze across the expansive court of the Gentiles already crowded with pilgrims. The people moving steadily towards her moved according to tradition, enter from the right and exit to the left. Only those who were under temple discipline would go against the flow of traffic, or those in mourning. She self-consciously brushed the skirt of her coarse black goat-hair widow's garment with trembling fingers of her left hand, and clenched her right fist a little tighter. There in her palm she felt the edges of the 2 copper coins, thin and hard-pressed into her skin. 2 mites. It was almost nothing, but it was all she had. She squinted into the already fierce Middle Eastern sun hanging in a cloudless blue sky, took a deep breath, and stepped into the crowd court of the great Herod the Great's magnificent temple. To the left, the temple rose breathtakingly above all else, a magnificent structure of white marble and gold, roofed with silver. The court of women, also known as the court of the treasury, was straight ahead, but it seemed impossibly far away as she moved against the flow of humanity. Over and again the worshippers who crossed her path offered the same greeting as they recognized her vestiges of bereavement. May he who dwells in this house bring you comfort. Comfort? Oh, if they only knew. She was learning many lessons in the wake of her husband's passing, and comfort was most certainly among them. But it was not the first. Before comfort came the far more difficult lesson of trust. At first, her days and nights had been a whirlwind of searing pain, rending loss, and blinding terror. But then her tears had stilled enough that she could listen, and her heart had quieted enough that she could remember. She was strengthened as she recalled God's past deliverances, the stories of the ancient Jewish fathers, and the countless words of the prophets and the Psalms that had been rung through the synagogue of her childhood. And so a journey of trust began as she recited from memory. Do not put your trust in princes, in human beings who cannot save. When their spirit departs, they return to the ground. On that very day, their plans come to nothing. Psalm 146, 3 and 4. It was easy for a woman in her day to put her vast amount of trust in the security of her husband, but life had taught her with brutal efficiency just how quickly all the security could be stripped away. All men, even good men, return to the ground, and the day that they do, their best of their plans vanish like the morning dew beneath the rising sun. She glanced at the majestic columns of the court of women ahead of her. With her eyes she followed the graceful lines to the far end, where 15 semicircle steps, one for each of the psalms of ascent, rose to the gates of Nicanor. On festival days the courts would be bright with lamp light and filled with music and dance as the Levites lined the steps, singing hymns of praise. Beyond the massive doors was the temple itself. The size of the stones alone were enough to invoke awe in anyone who saw them. Truly Herod the Great built the temple with astonishing grandeur. But that was not the limit of his extraordinary architectural accomplishments. He also built Caesarea Maritima, a city to rival the glories of Rome, but a city without a natural harbor. So, out of pure determination, might, and ingenuity, Herod sculptured an artificial one on the floor of the sea. When he longed for the sanctuary of a fortress with all the comforts of home, he built Masada in the middle of the desert. Then, to ensure that all Jerusalem never forgot he was always watching her, Herod moved a mountain to build the concho fortress palace that was made for his namesake, Herodium. Through mortar and stone he sought to be a god. And yet he too was a man. And when he died, he returned to the ground like all the other men. Pausing for a moment, the widow raised her left hand to shield her eyes from the sun. The court of women was only a few steps away. She could already see the 13 chaufferette or collection boxes that lined the court. The light of the sun, now high in the sky, was reflecting off the metal shofar-shaped tubes affixed to the top of the boxes where the donations were deposited. Each time the worshiper dropped their donations down the shofar and into the box below, a loud, distinctive noise rang throughout the temple courts. The larger the donation, the louder the shofar rang. As a result, this act of giving had come to be known as playing of the trumpets. The widow no longer had a husband to provide for her or protect her. No inheritance had been left for her either. Step 1 was a hard lesson. She would find no help from man, and if not man, where? He upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets the prisoner free. The Lord gives sight to the blind, and the Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. Psalm 146, 7 and 8. She stepped into the expansive court filled with people. Some of them wore the muted brown and yellows of the common man, but many wore the fine fabrics in the beautiful blues and violets and reds of the wealthy. Jewels hung about the women's necks and from their wrists and ears. The men held heavy bags of silver and gold for an offering, and the court was filled with the sound of the donations being dropped into the shofars. And when donations rang especially loudly, all around would turn to make note of the donors and their generous gift. She paused for a moment and opened her hand to gaze down at the 2 small coins. With her finger of her left hand, she caressed their circumference. The Lord watches over the foreigner and sustains the fatherless and the widow. Psalm 146, 9. The sight of the coins in her hand was blurred by the tears of gratitude. Comfort had come. Solace had found her when she reached her end and realized it was actually no end at all, because her faithful God was there. She knew He would uphold her cause and provide for her and sustain her. She took a step forward and lifted her palm to the shofar. The 2 small copper coins glinted in the sunlight before falling out of sight. They barely made a sound as they fell into the depths, and no one turned to observe her playing of the trumpet. But nearby, the Son of God had stopped everything just to watch. Jesus called his disciples and pointed to the widow, garbed in a coarse goat hair among the brilliant linens and silks that others wore. Ignoring the heavy bags of gold and silver resonating loudly in the shofarets, Jesus focused on the soundless descent of the 2 small copper coins. His heart was touched by her trust and profoundly moved by her adoration. Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all that she had to live on. Mark 12:43-44. My hope. Still, my soul, quiet me with your love when I am reeling from a loss, broken and afraid. Lift my eyes to you once again, that I may remember that though the way seems dark, all is not lost. For when I reach my end, you, my Alpha and Omega, are forever there. I am safe in your arms, and I adore you. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.